So a man is washing his car with his son, and his son stops him and says, "Dad, why couldn't you just use a sponge?" Anyway, just bad jokes aside, today I want to talk to you about finger pathways, or really what the way to choose which fingers play which notes through your phrases. So when I say finger pathways, I'm not talking about like sending each individual finger down the corridor of some haunted house or something like that. I mean choosing how your fingers, or rather which fingers you use on which notes as you move through your phrase. And this is something that you see on just about every instrument, especially fretted or stringed instruments, or it's very prominent in piano. It's not as focused in guitar. You'll see it in classical guitar, but you can kind of get away with not focusing too much on it in rock and jazz. If you're still hitting the right notes, then who really cares, kind of thing. Although at the higher levels, you'll see guys think about this a lot. But on the Chapman stick, I think it's one of the most important aspects of your playing, and I think that considering your finger pathways on the stick is basically the next step past the basic technique of just being able to tap. And I say this because on an instrument like guitar or bass, you're plucking and you're playing your notes, and you can slide through them and you can phrase them in certain ways. And with guitar, my teacher put it, my old teacher Gustavo said it best to me back in high school. He said that your fretting hand is what you're playing, and your picking hand is how you're playing it. But with the stick, especially with just the basic tapping technique, each hand is both what you're playing and how you're playing it. So if you want to phrase notes smoothly and efficiently, and really bring out the natural sentence structure of your musical phrases, then you need to be able to understand how to get through those phrases in a smooth and efficient manner with plotting out your finger pathways. Alright, so I wanted to just break down a couple of concepts that I think about when it comes to finger pathways that really help me get into the mindset of kind of setting myself up for success, if that makes sense. So here we go. So one thing that I think is really important is attempting to stay within one quadrant's worth of notes. And remember, a quadrant is 5 frets, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then you're in the next quadrant, right? So if you focus on staying within a single quadrant's worth of notes, or 5 frets from wherever you are, with your first finger not traveling lower than the first fret, and your pinky finger not traveling higher than that 5th fret of that grouping, then that kind of forces you to keep your hands still. And by keeping your hands still, you have to focus less on jumping around the neck all the time. And as you get better, you might make the choice of like, oh, I want to slide up here because I like the sound of a slide, or I want to, I want to go to this lower string to hit that note because I think the tone of the string is better. But for now, let's just focus on staying within one quadrant's worth of notes. And I think a really good example of that is the melody from Bach's Minuet in G, just right in the beginning. Just that much. And so I'm using my 4th finger to start, right, and I'm starting right on, for me, right on the beginning of the 3rd quadrant. And it's 4th finger down to my 2nd finger, and if you notice, you've got these 4 fingers here, so that's almost the full quadrant, right? Right there. If my quadrant started right here on the 8th fret and went up to the 12th fret, I'm almost covering it just with my 4 fingers right there. Really, if you want to focus on covering a full quadrant, it just requires a single slide of either your 1st finger or your 4th finger, and then you pretty much should be good. But going back, start with my pinky down to my 2nd finger, right like that. And if you look at the exercises, you'll notice that I have set it up so that when I'm coming back to that G, there, I start with my first finger and then double tap to my second finger to set myself up for the next phrase. Oop. Right, so 4, 2, 4, 1 through 2, 4, 1, 2, 1, 2, 4, 1, 3, 4, 1, 2. And that allows me, if you notice, I'm not moving my hand up and down at all. I'm staying entirely in the same place, right? Within the same quadrants worth of notes. Using the same phrase as an example, there's another concept right there too, which is using the double tap, or sometimes the triple tap, to set yourself up to enter the next phrase smoothly, right? So, as I said before, I'm starting with my pinky, and then going to my second finger. And then I had mentioned that I was going from my pinky down to my first finger first. Even though that fret is lying underneath my second finger, I'm using my first finger first, because the next phrase starts a fret below that. And so I can't end on my first finger and then smoothly jump up to the fret below. You hear it? So what I do is use my first and then second finger, and then I'm right there. So again, what you're attempting to do is really just find the most efficient fingering. I mean, I'm going to repeat this again at the end of the video, but this is the core concept, is that you're trying to find the most efficient pathway from the start of the phrase to the end of the phrase with your fingers. And that includes setting yourself up for the next phrase, if that's what's required, which is why you do the double tap. And in the exercises, I've included a pretty straightforward exercise for the double tap, and you can do that between any one of your fingers. All you're doing is just sounding one single note over and over again with each one of your fingers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 1. Just like that. And I find that is an invaluable tool for smoothing out phrases and preventing awkward leaps from one note to the next. I think a really good example of the double tap is in the Johannes Brahms Lullaby rendition that I did. You know, the first two notes of the phrase are this double tapped E. And it sounds awkward to me to go. It's like so choppy and kind of gross. So I just double tap that between my my third and fourth fingers. 3, 4, 1, 3, 4, 1, and then I follow the natural shape of the phrase, or the natural shape of my hand rather, and start on the fourth finger for the next part. 4, 1, 2, 1, 4, double tap to 3, and then pull off to 1. Another concept that I find really important is making the choice to go with the natural shape of your hand, right? There are a lot of times where you have to play, you know, very close frets across strings, or maybe the same fret across multiple strings. And if you're fighting the shape of your hand, you know, if you're going like 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, like that, like, that's a very awkward fingering for me, or something like that, or, you know, 2, 1, 2 to play that major arpeggio. That's a very awkward fingering for me. And if you just follow the shape of your hand and you use third finger, second finger, first finger, or even first finger, second finger, first finger like that, or, you know, do the same thing but starting on your fourth finger and going down to your second finger, like that, or like that. That's so much more natural. Just the shape of my wrist follows the shape of the chord perfectly. Same goes with, you know, I play in Geff, I play a lot of these like ninth arpeggios, which is just on the bass side. In the fifths tuning, it's just, excuse me, it's just the same fret across 3 strings. And a lot of times I will just follow the fingers up. It lays so naturally for me. You know, the third finger on the lowest note, second finger on the middle note, first finger on the highest note, rather than doing something like upside down like this. But when I'm playing, you know, like a major arpeggio in the bass side, then I will do that, because that's what, you know, falls under the natural shape of my hand. Is first finger on the lowest note, second finger on the middle note, and pinky on the high note, or ring finger on the high note, depending on if it's minor or major. But it doesn't really matter, so long as it feels natural and it feels efficient. And the efficiency thing is like, it's a comfort thing, but it's also a how would I put it? It's also a smoothness thing. And you know, I had talked about in one video about having, you know, 100% of your attention that you have to split between two hands. And the more natural and the more efficient your fingerings are, ultimately the less attention they're going to require when you actually have to play them. And so, you know, the less you have to think about your fingerings, the more you can think about your phrasing and how you're playing the notes, or, you know, that really hard part in the bass side coming up, you're going to have to draw your attention away from your right hand to nail the bass side part. And so, you know, if you've got a really efficient and natural feeling finger pathway in your right hand, it's going to be much easier to take some of your attention off of that and place it into your left hand than if you had to really fight for getting those notes right. And then you have to like focus on both, and you're just making it harder for yourself. And then the last concept that I want to leave you with is you know, using slides and bends and pull-offs and stuff like that. And I'm going to use an example from Whole Body Headbang by Geff on our upcoming album. And so there's this like big riff that, you know, it's like the first contrasting riff to the really quiet part in the beginning, and it goes like this. Whoops. Right, and going back, you know, I'm using these, that it's the same thing, following the natural shape of my hand there. Right? But anyway, I don't want to talk about the half cross part. The second time it comes through, I actually switch to uncross because I'm bringing some chords onto the top of it. Like that. And it winds up sounding like this. Now, I had to be super cautious with the phrasing of the left hand there to make it sound as smooth as I wanted it to. And that's what I want to talk about, right? So I'm starting, you know, it's this big wide leap, right? And I'm starting with a slide and then a bend to get that kind of smoothness that I want. I start with my third finger because it's a little stronger than my pinky. You know, if I have to make an emphasized note in the bass side, I'll probably use my third finger, just because, or I'll just basically avoid my pinky. I use my pinky in the bass side, but not for, you know, strong notes that are of importance, because it's just not as strong a finger as the rest of my fingers. So I'm starting on my third finger, and then jumping back to this C and sliding up, and then bending up. All with my first finger there. Then, after I bent, third finger, first finger, second finger, slide down to the, staying on my second finger, I slide down, and I wind up on my first finger here so that I can get this nice stretch and reduce the amount of space, you know, reduce the jump to as small as possible from this C to the E flat here. Then I do an octave, back to third finger. Same thing in the beginning. And then I keep my third finger. Rather than going 3, 1, 2, I go 3, 1, 3. And that's because I want to slide down now. And I'm doing, again, that ninth arpeggio where I need to follow that shape of my hand, 3, 2, 1, right? Right? Oops. Then when I get there, I hold on to the note so it doesn't separate too much. I don't want that. I want this whole phrase to be nice and smooth, so I just kind of slide the note up and then let go of it when I hit the next note. But I land on my second finger, which sets me up perfectly for my third finger, and then I slide up, and then now I'm on my second finger. And then aside from the second finger, this part of the phrase has no difference from the first phrase. Down to the second finger there. And then third, slide up on my first finger, down on my second finger, and then I slide down, and I'm still on my second finger, and I slide up to the 7th fret, and I use my thumb of my right hand because that's a little awkward of a reach, you know, if I'm here and then I have to swivel down like that. I'm not too much of a fan of that. So just use thumb technique to snag that note. And then the ninth arpeggio again. So all together with just my right hand, nice and slow, is going to look like this. So that's a few concepts that I like to use. It gets deeper than this, obviously everything gets deeper, and as I condense my thoughts on this, I will likely return to this subject and, you know, have a deeper version of this if you guys like it. But, you know, take these and like, I can't express to you enough, my playing changed when I started to consider my finger pathways. And whenever I learn something, first I learn the notes, and then I learn the most efficient pathway. And I spend a lot of time, you know, trying out different combinations and seeing what feels best and what feels the most natural to me. Because I know that the better my pathways are, the easier I'm going to be able to play this stuff, and the smoother and the faster I'm going to be able to learn it. And you know, it just really, again, I think that after you master the basic technique, this is the next step, is starting to head into this mindset. So take these, try it out with your own music, try it out with some of mine. I've got exercises for these available at my Patreon. And yeah, hope you dig it. Thanks a lot. Keep exploring.